As I said in the opening, the format of this conference is different than what we've done in the past. We have convened a stellar group, not only of participants, but of our panelists for today. And so we have around 40 minutes or so to engage in the discussion. And the format will be that it will be open. Randy and Susan will field questions and comments from the discussants. I've asked each of you to make sure that comments and questions are brief and concise so that we can give others a chance to weigh in or ask their questions as well. A couple of technical comments as well. Because we have so many microphones in an enclosed space, please make sure that you pull the microphone close and turn it on while you're speaking, and then when you're done, turn it off so that we don't get feedback across them. So with that said, look for the nearest microphone, and we'll start with our first question. So does anyone want to jump in first?
This is really, I guess, for both of you in a way. I was interested to hear a couple of corollaries about creating healthy competition, right? Beneficial hierarchies. And then Interfaith Youth Corps was somewhat mentioned in both. I've followed Interfaith Youth Corps, and the piece of their model that's interesting to me is the fact that not only is there dialogue, but there's also service. Sort of the idea that there's a common goal or enemy, and that's the best way to unite people of disparate views. And then with your list of 10 different categories, I'm struck by the fact that, at least as far as I know, there's nobody out working in an interfaith way around concrete activities in each of those 10 areas. Is Interfaith doing more than I think, or is there a need out there for that sort of thing, to be doing more specific interfaith activities around arms reduction or, any of the 10?
Good question, Luke. I think, first of all, and I've volunteered for Interfaith Youth Corps since it was in Ibu's basement. And I very much like the service learning model because it is a practice. And as someone who's been involved in the work of peace since I was in college, peace is a practice. It is not a theory. And so I find that tends to help people in the IFYC model, and you could have it here on your campus. Just go to ifyc.org, and you can have an IFYC program here that can work with students to develop this service learning model. And what happens is that people think, well, we're going to end up with religious relativism. Everybody's we'll all agree with each other. And that was the one place where, in understanding, yes, Luke, agreeing, not so much. And in fact, I think, and I teach a course online, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, approaches to interfaith engagement. And I teach this with a rabbi and a Muslim scholar. And we have projects that people who take this course have to do, community projects. And people of goodwill walk around with this model in their head that, at the end of the day, we all really agree, right? I mean, that's people of goodwill, that's what they think. And that's also to misunderstand, because what one is doing is, of course, I agree with myself, naturally, so I'm then going to project that onto your faith. And what I particularly appreciated about your presentation was you quoted the Quran. You've taken the time to learn something about other religions. So people they tell each other about their own religions in these campus projects. Well, what's the first thing you have to do to tell someone else about your own religion? You have to learn it yourself. And, it's tough sometimes for people to articulate, well, this is why I, as a Jew, am going to help paint this homeless shelter. And then at the end of the project, you tell each other what you learned about the other faiths. So it's a both and. You go more deeply into your own faith tradition, and So it really is a practice norms approach. And precisely, Luke, because you don't, and I don't know everything that is going on in terms of interfaith cooperative practices for peace around the world, but let's remember that the 3 women who just received the Nobel Peace Prize all received those prizes for interfaith peacemaking projects in their own countries. It's an international norm. But people, you know, it's so against the narrative of faith conflict that even you can see faiths cooperating and yet not get the message, because there's a counter narrative. I mean, that's one of the most pernicious things we face is the counter narrative.
There are thousands, as you were saying, literally, if you go to the internet, there are thousands of initiatives around the world today, grassroots initiatives of people trying to do interfaith work. And what hasn't happened is it hasn't been top down, it's been bottoms up, with the exception of I mentioned in my talk, the Roman Catholic Church, given its already hierarchical organization, has been able to literally develop a couple of nodes for diplomacy. But with the exception of maybe Salt Lake City, no other church that I'm aware of has quite that centralized authority. And so what we're finding today is this loose amalgam of efforts and amalgamation of effort that is very loose. Something new, as I'm preaching in my little speech, has got to happen, where we have to somehow institutionalize and make a part of the organic orthodox practice of every religion. Understand, organic to the religion, orthodox to the religion, not fringy stuff. This practice of bringing in to what we call dialogue other religions, and that it's okay to do it. It's not only okay, it needs to be done to show that you're orthodox. And the unique key to this that we have found in our work in dealing with people who are interested in evangelizing the world is the hook to get them to listen in a true open dialogue is the chance for them to preach to a unique audience that that has never listened to them before. And what we have found is this miracle occurs that's mentioned here in Simone Weil's work, when opponents come together in this way of openness where they're honestly telling you, I'm worried you're going to hell, okay? Your religion is false even though you think it's true. When someone can say to you that, and you stay at the table, you do not take offense because you sense already the sincerity of the belief. That it's not arrogance, it's sincerity, as Richard Rorty would say. Then something happens when that person finally shuts up and it's your turn to respond, and they actually sit there and listen because they have been heard. Then it's clear that both of you are thinking the other is deeply wrong about a lot of things. But what is clearer is that you both are coming to respect and maybe even love each other. And that is the clearer, deeper message, not the content, which has to be there for the integrity. And they might say, those participants, they say, baloney, you and your love stuff. You know, I care about his soul, and he's got to do this and that. That's fine. As long as, our view is, as long as they come to the table and have this other experience where they come away moved so they're not as angry or suspicious, but they simply now know why they are opponents, why they should be opponents, and that they can trust the other person not to lie or cheat or steal in their contestation. You see where I'm going with this? It's not for everybody. a lot of people would come, we have ways of looking at dialogue, and what you have to say is, what is the purpose for your dialogue? Is it for mutual understanding alone? Fine. Is it for cooperative good works? Social action? Fine. Is it for contestation of ultimate reality? Fine. All of those now need to be brought into the process of dialogue. The latter has been verboten, because you've got to be totally, understanding only here. That means for 3/4 of the world, you can't be real. Because what I care most about is that you believe my religion is true and superior to yours. And that's who I am. Okay? And as long as we allow that to happen, then this miracle of mutual respect can start to happen.
I wish Susan and Randy were more enthused about their topic. Tragically, Susan, one of those recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize was condemned by the government of Lebanon, or the government of Yemen, because she was provoking unrest in the country, which is kind of an interesting dimension. I'd like to ask Randy and Susan for some advice. The current conflicts in the Middle East remind me of when I was teaching at the University of Jordan during the time that the Danish press published the cartoons of Muhammad that were so offensive to many Muslims. And a professor at the university and I were talking about it, and he was condemning the publication, and I was talking about free speech. And he said, isn't it the job of government to protect people from blasphemy, to protect the citizenry, religious or non, but to protect everybody from blasphemy? He says, even in liberal Europe, a person is convicted in Austria for denying the Holocaust. Why is not your government, or the government of Denmark, but your government implicit, taking action to deny blasphemy of any kind? It was a fun discussion, and I'd like to ask each of you how you would have responded. And we were invited to do a university-wide forum on it. And so what would you have done?
Well, I'm fluent in blasphemy. Because historically speaking, to be a woman, to be a religious leader, to be ordained, blasphemous, to claim that religious authority. So there's an aspect of blasphemy that is protest. And, our commitment to religious freedom, I do think entails the right to go to hell if you want to.
Roger Williams.
Right. And so, yeah. However, a decent society practices its freedoms wisely, practices them not only in terms of individual ire or pique, but engage. I mean, this is such a good example what recently happened, because this film, YouTube fake video trailer, it was designed, to be insulting, not to come from someone's conviction of another secular or religious point of view. Blasphemy laws in Pakistan, for example, show us what the Jungians might call the shadow side of blasphemy. And I think often, and having looked at those laws in Pakistan for something we were doing at the Center for American Progress, and how they function, in situations of social anxiety, is a good lesson, I think, in why governments can't do this, because it can't be done. And I think you made the point, Charles, that you can say you're going to use force to control whatever, to make illegal whatever. Good luck with that. because people's freedom of expression, I think, will find a way. And so I see it also as resistance movements, things with which I may profoundly disagree. But I think governments are the last vehicle, the worst possible vehicle for trying to deal with what one religion considers blasphemous, because my own personal experience, I would not be a religious leader if other people, my ancestors in resistance, had not violated those rules. So, it's not something that can be done. And when it's attempted, I think it becomes even more disastrous.
The method we try to use in our interreligious diplomatic work is to take a question like that and try to imagine being on the other side of it. Okay, when would blasphemy make sense to me? Right. And like you did. And then when would making it illegal make sense to me? And what I've tried to do in response to your thought, Bonner, is to say, okay, hate speech, or pornography, okay? Those things are complicated issues that we are negotiating in our own society that have a legal aspect to them that I think we can all feel when I use those words, hate speech and pornography. Ooh, the government ought to protect some people from that stuff, somehow. And so I'm answering you that it's always a negotiated, complex issue based on the situation. And I would say that in some places, there ought to be laws against blasphemy. It's organic to that community, and you ought to pay for it if you're going to be a protester. There's no simple protest here. You're risking your life. And in other communities, there should be no laws against blasphemy in the traditional sense. So I'm not trying to be wishy-washy here. I'm just trying to say we have our lines. We are part of a culture. And part of, I think, what we would call respect or even social love would be to say, I honor your lines. In a Pauline sense, I'm all things to all people. I really don't care whether I eat, meat that was sacrificed for idols or not, because I don't want to offend you. I won't eat it,
Right, well, that's my point.
And so there's the sensitivity to this whole question is really important, especially now that we have no barriers to information. It's where are our borders? Where are they really? And when we know that we give it out from Denmark or Holland or the USA, and we know who's going to get it, then it really gets complex, even though our laws and our culture are such. If we know enough, then we have to really think hard about this. William James would say on this, he's a pragmatist. What are the effects? What are you trying to accomplish? And I think that's the most interesting question here. That's why I think what was done is despicable. It's not a legal matter, but what the intended effects were. There you go.
Thank you. I have a question about what you're talking about, because in the media this morning, it talked about the fact that restrictions on religion are getting more extensive. So since within the last 5 years, we've increased the restrictions by 10% across the nation or across the world. As you were just saying, with all of the communication capabilities, supposedly we're more educated than any other group on the planet. Why does it get worse instead of getting better?
What do you mean by restriction?
Well, they talk about anything from whether a woman needs to be veiled, as you were talking about earlier, being female, being blasphemous in some cases, to, disallowing demonstrations, those kinds of things. Okay, so we have the deterioration of religious freedom as it appears. Why is that happening with all of the education, et cetera, instead of it being more open?
I'm just uncomfortable with the whole every week. I think just as a general policy, eschewing globalizing, universalizing terms when we're talking about the French, laïcité, failing religious symbolism that's related to French history and culture. So one of the things that I did not have time to get into in the just peace paradigm is contextual analysis. You can't just butter peace practices over different societies, and you were alluding to this as well, Charles, that if you're going to be effective in this realm, just give up all, every, we, and so forth, and talk about in Poland under then, and you will, I think, be more effective both in analyzing what needs to open and to help civil tolerance, and to recognize what some of the motives or engines, as you're suggesting, are driving other societies towards greater restriction. And sometimes what looks like restriction of religion is actually the restriction of something else. So I would encourage a more contextually based analysis that then doesn't make us all think chicken little, the sky is falling. But at the same time, we look at specific problems, you're naming a specific problem, and then we look at what's going to be effective in France to be able to get more public expression of religious diversity acceptable in that culture, given the history of So, that's kind of where I'd be going with that.
Taking your lead in Iran in May this year. I was there for a dialogue, interreligious dialogue. The elephant that wasn't in the room, there were people from religions all over the world. The elephant that wasn't in the room were any Sunnis, by the way. They did not invite any Sunnis to the interreligious dialogue, which shows you the intra-religious dialogue, the intra-religious conflict is always the real issue in any inter. It's a fascinating thing we can talk about. But on this point, I will answer it boldly and almost give a we, and say that the imposition of Western pop culture, science, medicine, the immense power that has, especially on young people, has in Iran and in Cairo, where we have some initiatives going on, and I'm talking about women on the street type responses, has made them so worried about the seduction of the morality of the people, both sexual norms, family norms, and what we might call health norms, that they're circling their wagons, tightening it down, making it real clear to people. So it's this contamination that they're trying to resist. They wish they had our medicine and some of our science, but it's not worth going to hell for. And so they're protecting. Interreligious conflict at the real rubber meets the road is, are my loved ones in danger? That's where it happens. If my loved ones are in danger, if you're in Mormondom here, are they going to go and marry in the temple or not? Are they, if it's an evangelical community, are they not going to confess Jesus? Whatever it is, you care about that so deeply that you want to put up those barriers. And therefore, some form of restriction It's hard to listen to Milton, what's the Areopagitica, what's his famous, wonderful line, those of you can quote it, you don't trust any cloistered virtue. That sounds great until you're a father of a teenager and you want to cloister all that virtue, you want to cloister that kid. And so I think that's what's going on in the world, a lot of desire for protection.
I want to just underline also the age of new media, the internet, and in fact social media now. It is impossible to overestimate the role that this plays in religiously motivated and or manipulated conflict. My last book is called Dreaming of Eden, American Religion and Politics in a Wired World. And it is, as far as I know, the first theology of the internet. And what I did is use Reinhold Niebuhr. And Reinhold Niebuhr, in 1952, says that new technologies tempt people to overreach. This produces anxiety, and its result is aggression. 1952, he didn't have an iPhone, but I think if there's any description of our time, it is technology tempts overreaching, and that in turn makes, I have grandchildren, and I shudder to think what my children are up against in terms of trying to keep them safe electronically. But we're the exponential increase in this. I mean, we don't yet have the capacity to understand what this is doing to us. I think it moves too fast. But I think if a takeaway is that this increases anxiety and therefore results in aggression is helpful. It's a helpful insight that Niebuhr provided when somebody handed him a television.
That aggression can be defensive and offensive. Yes, either way. So the interpret the defensive aggression.
My question may build nicely on Bonner's and Linda's. Susan, you spoke of a transcendent leap from a war paradigm to a compassion, to a paradigm that leads to compassion and sympathy. And Randy, you spoke of a need for a social collaboration that becomes essential to come to a meeting of the minds, peaceful coexistence.
I say peaceful coexistence.
Okay. I think my question will still work. But I appreciate the clarification, because I'm simply searching for clarification. So when we're talking about faith in interreligious engagement and sociality, Susan, is that leap in your world view a leap of faith, or is it a social exchange when you're interacting with someone of a different faith, and it may get, as Randy mentioned, even on the brink of combative, in that your beliefs are dangerous to me? Randy, at what moment is faith compromised, deep interfaith compromised, if at all, by the social engagement? In other words, inside I know that my interfaith is saying X, but my sociality says agree, nod, and say Y. So I'm interested in kind of massaging the parameters of the discussion that Bonner instituted and Linda launched as well. Can you add some clarification, please, both of you?
No leap. There's no leaping. To me, the self-transcendence is a virtue. It's a capacity that we cultivate or suppress in terms of both our faith communities and in terms of our society. And there's a lot of forces that are working against cultivating the capacity for self-transcendence, therefore leading to empathy. You called it love, I would call it empathy, but you know, one does not need to agree with another to have empathy for them. You know, some of the writing that's been done on, oh goodness, his name just popped right out of my head, Robert Lifton, did the first study of, right, the Nazis that were imprisoned, and he decided, after interviewing them extensively, concluded that they had no capacity for empathy, and that this was the source of their ability to commit mass murder. He did the same thing with the sarin gas attacks in a more recent book. And I think this is a function both of our faith communities, and I mean, they can be mutually reinforcing, they can be mutually destabilizing. You can have, like the Amish who cultivate, look at the Amish, they get, mass murder happens in the Amish community, and they have a strong enough cultivation of empathy that they're able actually as a community to forgive. So this is a model, but it's a model of an internal cultivation, and there are other ways in which I think, mass media, just to survive it, right? I mean, it is difficult to stay centered as a spiritual person with the noise. So I think there's some self-defensive, I'm just not going to listen to that anymore. Difficult to find mechanisms of transcendence, of self, to cultivate empathy from a different point of view, and but it doesn't happen as a leap. I think it happens both in terms of individual character, but as that character is developed within communities, supported within communities, or punished within communities, both religious and social.
Let me just really quickly comment on that. The reason I have resisted using compassion and empathy as a term, and I finally embraced just love, realizing it's a Christian-centric word and all that problems with it, but is that the psychology of empathy is one that has no direct call to action, whereas love has a call to action. And I have found in our work, unlike perhaps the study that I'll be very interested in that study. As I read Shakespeare, I read characters who can weep in deep empathy for some character and then go out and kill somebody that afternoon. In other words, the capacity for empathy does not have necessarily linked to it a moral character for action. And that's why I think, to respond to your point, there is a theological trust here undergirding the work we do at the Foundation for Religious Diplomacy. And it is that in that social interaction, and this, in a sense, is a leap, but it's certainly a leap that's been taken so many times it looks like good social science, that when human beings, literally in a therapeutic mode, are transparently open with each other about their as many motives as they can get out there, that a feeling of trust develops that does not require agreement or compromise on beliefs, fundamental beliefs. But the trust is that that other person cares about my well-being, that other person does not want to harm me. Levinasian mode, he says, thou shalt not kill. You will not kill me. I trust you won't kill me. Our mode is there is something in the human soul that goes in the positive direction when this trust goes down that says, thou shalt love me. Thou shalt help me thrive. Thou art glad I am here on this old globe, and you want me, even in my resistance to you, you want me here. It's that experience in the social aspect that I think saves us from feeling so overwhelmed by the temptation of the newness, of the delight of the love itself of another, that we can kind of stand back from it and say, I don't need to go all the way. I can kiss this person. I don't have to go all the way. There's that aspect of trust and naturalness that you don't want to seduce someone. You want that person to come to this, to use the word authentically, out of their own organic experience. If they're going to convert to a new worldview, they should do it robustly, out of the best that they had, not out of rejection, but out of saying that this is more and better. I don't know if I'm rambling here, but it's that sense that we can trust each other when we are more transparent with each other.
Thank you, Randy. Please join me in thanking Drs. Brooks and